Welcome back to English Peak, the space built for people who refuse to stay average. I'm Aiden.
And I'm Skye. And if you're here, you already know this isn't just an English podcast. This is where language meets strategy, psychology, and the kind of thinking that actually changes how you move through the world.
Exactly. And today, Skye, we're going into something that every single person listening has felt at some point, but almost nobody has ever truly decoded.
Betrayal.
Betrayal. Not the surface level my friend hurt my feelings version. We're talking about the full psychological architecture of betrayal, why it happens, what it does to your mind, and, this is the part most people never reach, how to use it as leverage for your own evolution.
Leverage. That's already the first power concept of today, Aiden. Leverage, the ability to transform a force working against you into a force that works for you. And we'll come back to that because trust me, betrayal, understood correctly, is one of the most powerful forms of leverage you'll ever encounter.
But before we get there, 3 chapters, 3 acts. Chapter 1, the anatomy of betrayal, what's actually happening in your brain and in the relationship. Chapter 2, the psychology of the betrayer, because understanding why someone breaks trust is the real power move. And Chapter 3, the reconstruction protocol, how high performers rebuild, not just recover.
And throughout all of it, we're building your English business vocabulary. Not with the list, not with flashcards, but the way elite professionals actually absorb language. In context, in motion, in meaning.
Let's go.
Chapter 1, the anatomy of betrayal.
Skye, let me ask you something direct. When you've been betrayed, and I know you have, we all have, what was the first thing that broke? Was it the relationship?
No, honestly, it was my own confidence, my judgment. I kept thinking, how did I not see this coming?
And that right there is the real damage. People think betrayal breaks the relationship. It doesn't. It breaks your internal model of reality. You had a map, a mental picture of who that person was, what they were capable of, how safe you were around them. And betrayal doesn't just hurt you, it invalidates the map entirely.
That's such a precise way to put it. And there's actually a term for this in cognitive psychology. Cognitive residue, the emotional and mental trace that a traumatic event leaves behind, long after the event itself is over.
Cognitive residue. And here's why that matters for your English and for your life. Cognitive residue is why betrayal follows you into rooms where it has no business being. You're in a new friendship, a new job, a new relationship, and suddenly you're guarded, overly cautious, reading between lines that don't exist.
Exactly. The residue is still there. And what's insidious, that's a great B2 word, insidious, meaning slowly and secretly harmful. What's insidious is that you often don't even realize it's happening.
Right. So let's name what betrayal actually does, because naming it gives you power over it. First, it shatters your self-esteem, not just your confidence in others, but your confidence in your own judgment. You start asking, was I too naive? Was I blind? Should I have seen the signs?
And naive, let's hold that word for a second. Naive doesn't mean stupid. It means inexperienced. It means you extended trust without full information. That's not a flaw. That's what open, functioning human beings do.
But the emotional response often turns it into a flaw in your own mind, and that self-doubt, persistent self-doubt, is what creates the walls, the emotional armor. You become guarded.
Guarded. Cautious about opening up to others because of previous pain. And here's the tension, Hayden. Being guarded protects you in the short term, but over time, it costs you something enormous.
Deeper connection, real relationships, opportunity. Because the same openness that made you vulnerable to betrayal is the openness that allows genuine trust to form. You can't selectively close off.
You can't. And that's the trap most people fall into. They carry the emotional baggage, unresolved pain from past experiences, into every new interaction, and it becomes a filter. Everything gets distorted through it.
Emotional baggage. It's not a metaphor. It's a cognitive weight that has real measurable effects on how you process new information, how you read people, how you make decisions.
So what's the move? You don't pretend the baggage doesn't exist, you identify it, you name it, and you consciously choose this weight belongs to that moment in that relationship with that person, not here, not now.
That's already a high-performance mindset, and it leads us perfectly into Chapter 2.
Chapter 2. The Psychology of the Betrayer.
Skye, this is the chapter most people skip because it's uncomfortable.
Because understanding the person who hurt you feels like forgiving them or excusing them.
And it's neither. Understanding is not excusing. Understanding is intelligence. And in business, in leadership, in life, the person who understands human behavior at its most broken has an enormous advantage over the person who only understands it at its best.
That's a powerful frame. So why do people betray? And I don't mean the obvious answer. I mean the real answer.
Almost never pure malice. Malice, the deliberate intent to cause harm. Real malice is rare. What's far more common is a combination of insecurity, fear, and what I'd call emotional immaturity.
Emotional immaturity, when someone hasn't developed the capacity to fully understand how their actions impact others. They're operating from a very narrow, self-focused perspective. Their immediate need, whether it's status, approval, security, overrides everything else.
And in a professional context, Skye, you mentioned workplace betrayal earlier. The dynamic is even more textured, because in the workplace, betrayal is often disguised as ambition.
Ambition, a powerful, legitimate drive to achieve, but when it's untempered by integrity, when there are no ethical guardrails, ambition becomes predatory. And the colleague who takes credit for your work, who undermines you in front of leadership, who shares your strategy with a competitor, they're not operating from strength, they're operating from fear.
Fear of not being enough, fear of being left behind. And that fear, that chronic insecurity, is what drives self-preservation behavior at the expense of others.
Self-preservation, the instinct to protect your own position, your own survival, even if it means causing damage to someone else. It's primal. It's also, in most modern contexts, deeply counterproductive.
Because the betrayer almost always underestimates the long-term cost. Short-term gain, they get the credit, the promotion, the upper hand in the situation. Long-term, they've compromised their reputation, their relationships, and their own integrity.
And here's the concept that unlocks this entire chapter, the compound effect. Every action compounds, positive or negative. The person who builds trust compounds trust over time. They become the person others rely on, advocate for, promote. The person who erodes trust through betrayal compounds that erosion, slowly, invisibly, until one day they're standing in a room full of people who are politely keeping their distance.
The compound effect. Small actions repeated over time, producing outsized results, positive or negative. It's a finance concept, a fitness concept, and, as we're seeing right now, a relationship and character concept.
So when you look at the person who betrayed you and you understand that they're operating from fear, from insecurity, from emotional immaturity, it doesn't erase the hurt, but it repositions you because you're no longer the victim of their strength, you're the witness to their limitation.
That's such a clean reframe, Skye. And that reframe, that shift in perspective, is what makes Chapter 3 possible.
Chapter 3. The Reconstruction Protocol.
Recovery is the average response to betrayal. Reconstruction is the elite response.
I love that distinction because recovery implies getting back to where you were. And Aiden, betrayal changes you. You cannot and should not try to get back to exactly where you were before.
Reconstruction means you're building something new, something more structurally sound, more intentional, with better architecture.
So where does it start?
It starts with forgiveness. And I know, forgiveness is the most misunderstood concept in personal development.
Because people hear forgive and they think, I have to pretend it didn't happen, or I have to let that person back into my life.
Neither. Forgiveness at the elite level is not a gift you give to the person who hurt you. It is a strategic decision you make for yourself. You release the anger and resentment, not because they deserve it, but because carrying it is expensive. It costs you cognitive bandwidth, emotional energy, creative capacity.
It's like running software in the background that you never use. It's consuming memory, slowing down the whole system without producing anything.
Exactly. Forgiveness is a system optimization. You close the loop, you free the resources, you move forward with full capacity.
And the next step in the reconstruction protocol is establishing boundaries, not walls, boundaries. There is a critical difference.
A wall is defensive and indiscriminate. It keeps everyone out equally. A boundary is intelligent. It defines what you will and will not accept. It communicates your values. It protects your emotional health without isolating you.
Boundaries are the language of self-respect. And in English, in professional and personal settings, the ability to articulate clear, calm, assertive boundaries is one of the most powerful communication skills you can develop. This is what I'm available for. This is what I'm not. Simple, decisive, powerful.
In the third and final pillar of reconstruction, growth. And I want to be specific here because growth is one of those words that gets used so often it starts to lose its edge.
Right, people say, I grew from the experience as a kind of vague consolation, but real growth is measurable.
Real growth means you can identify, specifically, what you now understand about human behavior that you didn't before, what you now know about your own values, what you now see about the kind of relationships you want to build and the kind you will no longer tolerate.
Betrayal, decoded, becomes a masterclass in discernment. And discernment, Aiden, is one of the rarest and most valuable skills in both leadership and life. The ability to distinguish, accurately, quickly, between what is genuine and what is performance, between who is aligned with you and who is simply adjacent to you.
Discernment, the fifth and final power concept of today. And it is perhaps the most elite of all, because you cannot buy it, you cannot rush it, and you cannot develop it without going through exactly the kind of experiences we've been discussing today.
So the betrayal didn't just hurt you, it equipped you.
If you let it.
Let's bring it home.
Here's what we covered today. Chapter 1, The Anatomy of Betrayal and How Cognitive Residue Quietly Shapes Your Future Relationships Without Your Permission.
Chapter 2, The Psychology of the Betrayer, Insecurity, Emotional Immaturity, and the Misguided Self-Preservation that drives most betrayals. Not malice, not power, but fear.
Chapter 3, The Reconstruction Protocol. Forgiveness as a strategic resource release, boundaries as the language of self-respect, and growth as the development of genuine discernment.
And the 5 power concepts you've now added to your arsenal: leverage, cognitive residue, compound effect, emotional immaturity, and discernment. Each one a tool, each one a lens, each one a way of engaging with the world at a higher level.
Now, here's my challenge to you. This week, in one conversation, professional or personal, use one of these 5 concepts. Not just the word, the thinking behind it. Notice how differently people respond when you engage at that level.
And if today's episode gave you even one idea that shifts how you see yourself or how you navigate relationships, share it. Someone in your circle needs to hear this.
Subscribe to English Peak, because this is what we do here. Every single episode. We don't just teach you English, we give you the language of people who think differently, who lead differently, who builds differently.
This is English Peak, and we'll see you at the top.
Let's go.